Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bible in 1 Year with a Preacher's Husband. Buckle up again because Judges chapter 10, 11, and 12 did not disappoint today. There is a long ride ahead of us tonight, and let's get started. Right off the bat, after Abimelech, who declared himself as the king, there came a pair of minor judges. They were Tola and Jair. Now, both judged Israel administratively without being involved in direct conflict, so to speak. The descriptions of Tola, they kind of recall the days of good judges. However, Jair, the Gileadite, with his 30 pampered sons, suggested multiple wives, and having 30 donkeys and towns implies a tendency to accumulate personal wealth, which was against what God said that a king of Israel or a judge of the Israelites should do. So basically God says he shouldn't do that, but here he was doing it. And like Abimelech, there's no mention that they were raised up by the Lord or empowered for their tasks by him at all. Now, the Israelites, again, did exactly what was evil in the sight of the Lord in verse 6. They worshiped Baals and Ashtoreths, and the list goes on and on. They actually plummeted into the depths of idolatry is what they had done. And they served no fewer than 7 false gods at this point. So the Lord's anger burned against them in verse 7, and he sold them to the Philistines and the Ammonites. They shattered and crushed the Israelites that year and for 18 years. And again, this is the review of the cycle of sin, because here they are, did what was evil. God punishes them. Israel's about to cry out here in just a second. We're going to read about it in verse 10. And then God raises up a judge. Israel's delivered, and there's peace in the land. So, now, the thing about this cycle tonight is, during one of these judges, that last cycle there, the peace in the land part, doesn't really happen. You're kind of waiting for it, and it just doesn't really come to pass, really. So let's see what happens. As I said, verse 10, they cried out to the Lord, "We have sinned against you. We have abandoned our God and worshiped the Baals." So God basically comes back and says, "But you have abandoned me and worshipped other gods. Why in the world should I take you back? I am not going to deliver you guys." So they beg, they plead, and they got rid of all their foreign gods, and they worship God. And God became weary of the Israelites' misery and pain and agony and constant wah, 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 save us, save us. So here he comes. He's got to raise up a judge again. So he's basically said, which man will begin the fight against the Ammonites? All right. The Ammonites were all called together, and they camped in Gilead. So the Israelites assembled a camp at Mizpah. And the rulers of Gilead said this. They said, which man will begin the fight against the Ammonites? Enter Jephthah. That's right, Jephthah. Now, the candidate that the Gileads were seeking came forward. It was Jephthah. And he's described as a valiant warrior, but he's also a social outcast. He's the son of a prostitute, driven from his home by all of his brothers. They named a father in there, but the father was like, maybe he's mine, maybe he's not. But all of his father's sons, who technically would be his half brothers, all ran him out of town. They basically said, you're out of here. We don't want you to have any of Dad's inheritance. Get out. So he lived the life of a bandit. He basically just lived off the land, stole stuff, and he was joined by worthless men, which is the same phrase that they used to describe the men that hung out with Abimelech, the Abimelech's mercenaries in chapter 9, verse 4. Exact same phrase. So the elders of Gilead invited Jephthah to be their commander later on. And Jephthah is kind of shocked by this. He's like, Okay, so before you wouldn't have nothing to do with me, but now you want me to come and command your armies. They offered to make him the military commander of their armies and stuff. And Jephthah, he was not really immediately won over by this appeal. Um, Again, he was just like, you were happy to run me off and get me out of here, and now you want me to come and save you. He's like, probably not, because the military leader was not really the leader overall. There was a leader, and then there was a military leader that reported to the leader of a tribe or of a people when it comes to the Gileadites. He would not have been the Gileadite leader. He would have just been ahead over their armies. He would have still had to answer to the Gileadite leaders. So in response, they actually begged him even further and upped their ante and said, look, we are going to instead make you the leader of all of Gilead. And they vowed in the presence of the Lord and made him their leader and commander. So they're bringing God into this. As their new leader, Jephthah acted pretty much like a king right off the bat. He went and spoke to the king of the Ammonites, and when he talked to him as if he was an equal. He didn't speak to him as if he was speaking up to him. He spoke to him at his own level, And the writings here will back that up. He claimed that the land of Gilead was his own personal property, but the king of the Ammonites contested this pretty harshly and was like, no, this was not your land. This is the land that was taken from us by the Israelites, which he said it belonged to him. But that claim was actually false, because if we read the Bible and if we read the history, at the time that Israel came from Egypt and the land was occupied, it was occupied by the Amorites, not the Ammonites. All right, so it was actually occupied by the Amorites. So really, his claim was false. The Ammonite king's claim was false. It was straight up a lie. Things happened, and victory was won by Jephthah. He took victories over 20 cities of the Ammonites, and Jephthah sought to ensure that the Lord's favor was with him by vowing a vow. And this vow has stirred up controversy in Christianity and in Judaism for centuries. This vow was to sacrifice as a whole burnt offering whoever came out the doors of his house to greet him after he had won his victory. And guess what happens? After the victory, Jephthah's vow came back to kind of haunt him a little bit. The one that came out to meet him was actually his very own daughter, playing a tambourine and dancing. This was the traditional greeting for the return of a hero. And she was his only daughter. Not only was she his only daughter, she was his only child. He had no sons. He only had one daughter and no sons. So, of course, you see him here tearing his clothing, and it's a sign of mourning. And this was bad. This was bad because they basically, he's pledged to kill his own daughter is what he's done. He pledged to God to kill his own daughter at this point, and he didn't realize it. Now, a few scholars, a minority of scholars, this is where the controversy comes in. Did he kill his daughter? Did he sacrifice her and slaughter her and offer her up as a whole burnt offering? Some scholars suggest that he did not kill his daughter, but instead he dedicated her to the Lord for her whole life. Now, the Bible doesn't say that, but most of those that believe this pull this from Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 11, and 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 24 through 28, which talks about when you sacrifice someone to the Lord, you're basically giving them to God to live their entire life as a virgin, unmarried, and only in the service of the Lord. and they would be put aside, and they were for the Lord. So they weren't dead, but they weren't allowed to marry, weren't allowed to have children. Either way, that still puts Jephthah here with no daughter, no grandkids. She's still not ever going to have babies. She's going to be a virgin forever. And they also say, why would they celebrate her sacrifice, and why would they give her a chance to mourn her virginity if she was just going to die? Why would he give him that? Why would Jephthah give her that time? But in the natural sense, the Hebrew literally translated does say, he did to her his vow that he had vowed, and that is that he would have slaughtered her. That's what the Bible says in this area. The literal Hebrew translation would have meant that he killed her, not that he dedicated her to God. But some people believe that. What do you think? Do you think Jephthah killed his daughter, or do you think he dedicated her to God, as other translations and a minority of scholars would say? That's up to you to decide. Now, we get into chapter 12. There's a conflict with Ephraim. In a kind of a replay of that explosive situation that Gideon had faced, and he successfully diffused in chapter 8. The men of Ephraim came out again and complained to Jephthah this time about not being invited to battle against the Ammonites. Now, Jephthah, he basically just declined this, and they threatened to burn down Jephthah's house with him in it. But Jephthah claimed that he called them and they did not come to deliver him. Now, Jephthah's claim is not confirmed by the Bible and the text, but it's not denied either. And it may be a convenient fabrication by him, or maybe he was telling the truth. I don't know. There's no evidence that says anywhere else that they actually said that. There's no documentation of that. But Jephthah took action against the Ephraimites because they questioned the legitimacy of him and the legitimacy of Gilead. So he did take action. He called out the troops once more, and this time against a tribe from his own people, the Ephraimites. Those who escaped and attempted to get back across the Jordan River to Ephraim were met at the fords with a test question. Please say Shibboleth. Now, the Hebrew word Shibboleth has no clear meaning really, but in the Ephraimite dialect, it was apparently pronounced Sibboleth instead of Shibboleth. So that's how they got caught up, and a bunch of them got killed because they mispronounced it. So Jephthah judged Israel for 6 years, and there is no mention of the land experiencing any peace or rest during his tenure. They were in war. It looks as if they were at war the whole time. So that kind of puts you at that cycle. Well, when did the peace happen? Don't know. But after Jephthah, there were 3 other minor judges, Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon. And again, Ibzan had 30 sons and 30 daughters, while Abdon had 40 sons and 30 grandsons, and of course 70 donkeys, and they practiced polygamy and acquired wealth. So none of these judges could have been kings by God's own standards. They were judges, but they could not be kings, because essentially Israel has wanted a king already for a while, and they were willing to accept Abimelech as their king. You notice these are the list of judges in order, and these are Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, Deborah, Gideon, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and tomorrow we're going to learn about Samson. So chapter 13, 14, and 15 tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 year with the preacher's husband. I hope to see you then. If this has touched you, please click the like button and the subscribe button, and click the little jingle bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a video. Hope you've enjoyed day 93. Hope to see you tomorrow for day 94. Peace.